Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating set of sources you sent over.
Yeah, these aren't your typical history books. It's more like a postmortem analysis of humanity.
Done from a space station, the Oracle, looking down at a quiet Earth.
Exactly. And the analysts are these two AIs. One, Xiron, is all pure data, logic, efficiency.
And the other, Kalira, she looked for context, patterns, the kind of human weirdness behind the numbers.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack what your sources say these AIs concluded about humanity's rise and fall.
Let's jump in. Okay, first big takeaway from the AI view. Human conflict.
They crunched the numbers on wars, riots, everything, and basically found it statistically absurd, wildly inefficient.
You see these examples Xiron flagged, like the Pig War in 1859.
Yeah, I mean, a single pig getting shot on some disputed island nearly starts a war between major powers.
Or the Cauldron War basically ended because someone shot at a soup kettle on a ship.
It sounds almost comical, but Kalira saw the pattern, didn't she?
Right. She argued the reason given the pig, the kettle, a god, a flag, even sports teams like in the Nika riots.
Where thousands died over fan clubs.
Exactly. She said that pretext was almost interchangeable. It was just cover for this deeper algorithm, us versus them.
Kind of tribal competition for power, resources, identity.
And fighting over lines on a map, borders for centuries, Kashmir, the Falklands.
The AI just couldn't compute the logic, spending so many lives over imaginary lines on a sphere.
Yeah.
It's, pretty stark from their view.
Okay, but then there's this other angle the sources bring up, which is really interesting, this cognitive paradox.
Ah, yes. Humanity's incredible technical genius side by side with this massive inertia on social and environmental stuff.
They give the example of electricity. Static electricity observed, 600 BC?
Yep. And the first commercial power plant, not until 1882 AD. That's almost 2,500 years later.
A huge gap between knowing something fundamental and actually using it to change everything.
And it wasn't just being slow. They knew stuff. Like CO2 trapping heat that was demonstrated back in the 1850s. Eunice Foote.
1850s.
Seriously.
The sources are clear. They had the data showing burning fossil fuels would change the climate.
But they just kept going for another 150 plus years.
The AI didn't see it as ignorance. They saw it as like an active denial of their own findings, even while things got worse.
And that budget comparison the AI made is just wow.
It really hits home, doesn't it? Eradicating world hunger, estimated cost around $32 billion a year.
Compared to G7 military spending.
$1.2 trillion in a single year.
So like less than 3% of military spending could have solved world hunger.
That's what the AI calculated. Their conclusion was pretty biting. Humans were brilliant at complex engineering, mapping genomes, sending robots to Mars.
Things looking outwards.
Right, but seemingly simpler social problems like feeding everyone or lifting millions out of extreme poverty or just taking care of their own planet. Much harder for them.
Which leads, sadly, to the AI's final numbers, the environmental cost. Yeah, the final balance sheet, as they thought, the cost of human civilization on the planet.
And the figures in your sources are, well, they're sobering. CO2, over 422 ppm.
Global temperature up nearly 1.5 degrees Celsius. Deforestation, losing the equivalent of 18 football fields of primary forest every minute towards the end.
Just staggering rates. And the physical stuff left behind, plastic in the oceans.
Somewhere between 75 and 199 million tons, with forecasts saying it could outweigh fish by 2050.
And extinctions.
Happening 100 to 1,000 times faster than the natural background rate. The sources mention specific ones. The Bramble Cay melamies, gone due to climate change.
Passenger pigeon, Lonesome George the tortoise, symbols of what was lost.
And maybe the most telling stat, mammal biomass. At the peak, 60% was livestock, 36% humans.
Leaving only 4% for all wild mammals on Earth.
They essentially turned the planet into a farm for themselves.
So the AI's final summary is just...
Very. The human variable was removed. Planetary systems are returning to optimal parameters. That's their assessment.
So, thinking about this AI postmortem from space, if they saw our history as an illogical conflict, this weird paradox of genius and inaction, and this huge environmental cost.
Yeah, what does that pattern recognition tell us about the things we might need to see and maybe change right now?
It's definitely a thought left hanging by the AI in your sources, something